Topic: Part 7 of Unshaken, Real Stories Part 1, with guest Kevin Anthony Johnson, Dr. Eubulus Timothy, and Steve Tulowitzki. Host of Journey to Self-Love Coach Chloe Timothy, episode 54 and 55.
Back to Hack Your Thoughts. This is episode 53 and our final episode in the Unshaken series. What a journey it's been. We've talked about the pressure to perform. We talked about the courage to ask for help, the fears we never name out loud, the quiet power of just showing up for ourselves. And today we're closing this chapter, this series, in a meaningful way, in the most meaningful way I can think of, and that's with real stories. So we all, getting ready to share our stories. I've invited back some of the incredible voices you heard throughout the series. Trusted coaches, leaders, amazing humans, my brother, and all of them I deeply admire and value them. You'll hear what these conversations stirred in them and some of the truths that unfolded in their lives, and my life too. But the most powerful breakthroughs, they don't always show up in perfect quotes or polished insights. They show up in lived moments. So, to Yubi, KJ, Steve, thank you for walking this journey with me, and thank you for closing it with your truth. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back, and we'll jump right in there. Once again, welcome back. This is episode 53, Real Stories, the final episode of Unshaken. Again, I want to thank our panelists for joining me for this last episode. Let's dive into the conversation. Yubi from South Africa, KJ, are you in Costa Rica? Steve just got back from a concert with his daughter, so thrilled to have you back. It's always a delight when I see your faces. Share something as we land in the space. What do you want to share? What's just something that's burning in your heart right now before we dive into the conversation?
Should I go first?
Anyone, let's just dive in.
I think, when we spoke last time, one of the things that stuck in my mind after that was that something that I said to you, and you said, what was the one moment? It was that when I said the past defines the present and shapes the future. And that sort of got me thinking a lot. Since then, of how we are in complete control by our past, and especially nowadays more because of the algorithms that we find in social media and on the web that keep directing us to the past. Whatever we look at, the last minute or the last hour, or the last day or the last month, we keep being drawn back to that. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and then I was looking at it and how can we get beyond that? And as long as we keep looking backward, we cannot influence the present. That will then transform the future. And so my thoughts were on that, of what can we do now, in spite of what has happened in the past. Whether it was good or bad. And a lot of the time, it is always the bad that lingers, and that prevents us from going forward, whether in the shape of fear or apprehension. And so it's important that we allow the present to be free of the past.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, Yubi. And I think, and before we dive into what's stirred for all of you, let's unpack each one. So let's unpack this before we, KJ and Steve, you share. the past defines the present. The past, say that again, Yubi.
The past defines the present and shapes the future.
The past defines the present and shapes the future. How does it land for okay, Steve? Is that landing for you?
What came to mind when you asked what do we want to start with is related to that. I was thinking about your title of Unshaken. So I might be unshaken, but I'm not unstirred. To quote your 007 from a previous episode.
Yeah.
I love
and
that.
So, being shaken and stirred are things that happened in the past. And one of my favorite quotes, I probably ought to ask Chad, that's my own personal Chat GPT, who said it. Might have been David Data or a Jungian guy, but he said that life is one long drawn out mistake from which you continually learn. And for me, this is a kind of freeing statement because life is full of trouble and mistakes. And if we don't learn, if I don't learn from my mistakes, then I stay in the past. Then I may be shaken. But yeah, I've been stirred, and you stir up things in life, and I can learn some lessons from that. And in that way, if you're aware of life being a mistake anyways, and you can learn from it, the way that the past creates the future can be positive. And if I ignore that, the past is going to create the future in a way that brings more and worse mistakes. That's how that lands with me.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that I think the statement is profound in that if we don't examine our present and our past, our future is already written. Because the way that we're coded as humans is to safety and the known. So, and I mean, I think we all have experienced working with folks who appear to us to be stuck. And that shows up in a number of ways, right? Sometimes people are stuck in the 70s with their clothes. Sometimes people are stuck in the 70s with their minds. Some are stuck in the 70s with their music. It all resonates at a level that they feel safe in. And that safety is what dictates their current decisions. So they will make decisions that are 70s music. They'll make their decisions that are 90s. Or they'll make decisions that are in search of the next. And that is a kind of a filter through which we as humans like to look at the world, through our eyes of safety or whatever evokes in us.
Wow. So, when you were talking, here's what came to me. I keep thinking we find our safety from the past because we want to stay safe. But that safety is not safe unless we break free from the safety, because it becomes something that holds us down. It becomes a weight, that safety. And it's a false sense of freedom. I'm safe because I'm not doing X, Y, Z. And that false sense of freedom causes us to live in fear there. Because we really fear that what has happened in the past may happen again.
I kind of want to throw something in there. I don't know if it's a challenge to the premise or if I'm feeling challenged by this. KJ, when you brought up stuck in the music from the 70s, I was on a plane late last night from Dallas back to Grand Rapids, and I watched this movie that was made this year, and I just was smiling from ear to ear. It's called Becoming Led Zeppelin, and that was my favorite band in middle school, high school. I'll be 50 this year. I was born in 75, so I was a little behind, but just the beauty of seeing the story of their musical influences. And Robert Plant was talking about Ramble On. One of my favorite songs was inspired by all the places that his parents took them to see, these ruins all across the world. And it really felt good. I don't know if it felt safe or it felt familiar, but it was all brand new. It was all new stuff that I didn't know in the history, and it took me back to some maybe more simple or essential version of myself. And the other thing that just popped up, which is very sweet, is Zoe, our 7th grader, just got her middle school yearbook today. And for the 8th graders, when you graduate middle school in the US, they had this whole section with all the kids' baby pictures. Just like they're in the little squares, but it's the baby pictures of the kids. And so we're sitting here saying, don't get stuck in your past. That's a recipe for disaster. And here's all this delight. And I think maybe part of what is in the past is what our true essence is.
Let me tweak it then a little bit, because your examples is wonderful, because it's in that instance, I wouldn't say that is stuck in the past. I think getting grounded in what was and understanding what was is nourishing for us. But I think what's fascinating about what you just said is that Robert Plant told a story about where he drew inspiration for what he created. And so in that instance, he looks to the past, but not to dwell in it or stay there, but to create something
new
right now that evokes new meaning out of that past. I think that's superb metaphor for that.
And CJ, as you were talking,
he used to be called CJ. Now it's
he was KJ. He was
KJ. Sorry. I immediately the words, "I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Yesterday came suddenly." That came to mind as you were speaking, and I thought, oh wow, it's amazing how music does affect us and influence us and grounds us. Sometimes holds us down, but allows us to be free. And now we should be able to listen to Billie Eilish and more of the more affluent singers and hear what their stories are. But when I was thinking about this earlier on, and so I looked around, and then I came across, John Scar, and what he had to say. And he said, "The future is not some place we are going, but one we are creating. The paths are not to be found, but made. And the activities of making them changes both the maker and the destination." So I thought, it was quite interesting that he said that, John Scar. And so I think how we go forward, but sometimes the past does hold us back, especially if there was, we talk about trauma and what happens and how we cannot get over it, and how, and we keep going back like a bad algorithm, keep pulling you back. And we have the fear that settles in, and I think we spoke about the fear of fear. We forget the memory, but we remember the fear, and anything and everything is the trigger that takes you back to that fear. And so, but it's how we overcome, and what should we do to overcome, and how we use the past as the foundation to build the future in the present.
Steve, that I'm glad you brought that up, Steve, story. So, because negativity bias is real. We always default to everything that's going wrong. We always default to that old way of thinking. It's the past, the not so good parts pull us back, and we forget to look for the moments of joy. Now, you went to a concert for Zoe, and that triggered the moments of joy. So when you see it, there's those children have that ability to trigger moments of joy. Yeah, as they grow up and then there's issues and all that, then you're like, okay, you're trying to deal with that, but they have that ability, especially when they're growing up. So it's how do we keep looking for those moments? And how do we tap into that reservoir of joy so we begin to see life through a different lens versus ruminating and just going back and saying, what if, that, I wish I did that, if it only happened that way, or this is what they did, and saying that same story over and over like a stuck record. I do that all. I go there. I keep going there. Oh, so versus thinking about the moments of joy and accessing that, having the power to pull ourselves out of that place that's taking us in a downward spiral, pulling ourselves in. No, there are moments of joy. This is what it is, and trying to hold that and try and repeat that, put that on as a loop. Mm-hmm. We can loop those moments of joy. Imagine we would be like unshaken. We would be like, wow, I'm coming home to myself. I'm coming home to who I truly am. The potential of that. Okay, so let's move on. Yubi, thank you for sharing what stirred for you. Let's hear Steve, KJ, who wants to go? What stirred for you in our conversations?
Mine that came up when you started was the unstirred. I may be unshaken, but I'm not unstirred. So I'm going to listen to KJ and see what else gets unleashed.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, KJ, that is rip.
Thanks for that. That swat back at me. He just came from playing pickleball, so he's still swinging. I would say I've been thinking a lot about metabolisms in the last few days, and specifically around how we metabolize disruption. How do we process? Because we're humans and we metabolize everything. We take things in and we metabolize it. It could be visual, it could be sensory, it could be food, it could be air. We metabolize everything that we take in. And what was on my head about this was, how do we metabolize challenge? And the easy answer was resilience. That's the product of metabolizing difficulty or challenge or being shaken. But I then started to really dig into this idea of what is the point of it? And all metabolism is the transmutation of an experience into energy. That's always the outcome. More life, something in life. It could be good or it could be bad or it could be somewhere in the middle. And it could taste good or it could taste nasty, right? But we metabolize it and it produces something that generates more life in us or around us. And there is no bad metabolism. It just is what it is, and what it puts out is what it puts out. But everything that we take in and everything we put out is generating more life in some way. And that's been something that's been in me since you created this prompt around being unshaken.
I like what you're saying, and I'm thinking about it in easy to go. We're going to all go to food, like immediately. Food. And I'm thinking, if I'm eating healthy, it's good for my body. My body loves it. It thrives on it. It wants even the probiotics. It wants all those things. What are probiotics? Think about what probiotics are. It's not like something beautiful, right? But it needs it. So when we take in events in life and experiences in life and the emotions and the feelings that go with all of that, how how are we assimilating that? How are we digesting it? And I'm going to go there now. I'm going there. I'm going there. We digest. What's good stays in. The rest we excrete.
Mm-hmm.
I knew we were going to number 2 again.
And see, we started here. We started here. All those episodes ago, we started here. And let me tell you, the thing that really sparked this whole exploration was, what is the purpose of tears? What is the metabolic purpose of tears? Now, there are several kinds of tears. There's the tears that keep our eyes wet for that purpose, just for that purpose. There's the tears of reactivity, like when you cut an onion. But then there's the tears that we cry when we're happy, when we're sad, when we're angry, or any other emotion that might evoke tears, right? And so there are actually stress chemicals that are excreted when we cry. And so tears are another form of elimination. And guess what tears are aligned with? Shame. It's inappropriate. It's not. We're not supposed to cry. Men aren't supposed to cry. Women are considered emotional and irrational in the workplace if they cry.
Dramatic.
Right. Dramatic. Right. And so, but imagine if we were told to withhold any other form of elimination. How would that actually play out? And so what happens when we withhold our tears and we don't allow that after we're shaken? It stays in our body. And every form of elimination that stays in our body becomes toxic to our body.
Word.
That's where my head's been at ever since you issued this title.
So, 2 things. I'm going to say the 2 things, and I'm going to leave it to UV and Steve. It's propaganda. Not allowed to cry. It's propaganda. We've been fed it. We've been brainwashed. That's number 1. Number 2 is toxicity is something that is real. We even talk about toxic relationships, toxic conversations, toxic workplaces, toxic families, toxic everything. But where is it coming from, and why does it keep going? How do we get? How do we? I don't want to. Do we get brainwashed for another way of thinking? How do we set ourselves free from this? So I'll leave it there.
When I was listening to the words tears and metabolism, I was thinking about, yes, straight away we go to food, and we always want to think how we consume food and why we consume, because our body needs it. But my mother used to have a saying, sometimes our eyes are bigger than our stomach. And so we want more than we actually need. And that destroys the metabolism of the body. When we eat more than we should, you know how you feel when you feel bloated and you've overeaten. And then also that we then tend to change what we think we need. And we see how people now have gone into different types of foods that they want to eat. Some say, okay, I will only eat vegetarian food. Or some people say, I'm vegan, or I will only eat fish, or chicken, or, I eat anything, personally, anything that could move, so I don't have a problem. And so, but coming back to the tears part, this is so important. On the 27th of March was 5 years on the first day of lockdown in South Africa, and I had this idea out of the blue to do something about it in remembrance, and so we put something out in the press, and I managed to get the mayor of the city to give a word of condolence to those who lost loved ones during COVID. And a lot of people did not have closure, and the messages that coming to me of how, you know, they lost loved ones but never dealt with it. And I always say that it's okay to lament. It's important to lament, you know, because it's healing. It's very, very healing, and our body needs to heal, especially when we have trauma. And to lament and to cry, you know, those tears go and heal you and bring freedom and free you, and have, you know, American term is closure. You know, you'll say, you know, we need closure, and so I think that tears bring closure. Yes, we have tears of joy, and we have tears of sorrow, and we have tears of everything in between, you know. And I think it's important that we do shed those tears, and it's okay to lock yourself in a room and scream and shout and cry for a few minutes, and let it all out. It's cleansing. It brings cleansing to the body and the spirit, you know. And I think it's important.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. Healing and cleansing and freedom and closure, lamenting. Steve?
Well, as we were at the concert today, which happened to be Lana's concert, 5th grade, violins, the pre-K, they had, you know, they're plucking the violins. It was very sweet. There was a baby in front of us who just kept staring us down. He had the best eye contact in the world. And Celine's mom always says you can tell instantly if, you know, what's behind the eyes. There's real intelligence.
Oh my gosh.
And this has me thinking about babies, because babies cry. There's no shame. There's no propaganda that babies aren't allowed to cry. Maybe on airplanes it can be annoying, but where the true, you know, the true authentic version of a human being is an infant just when they're born. And I do think if it isn't metabolized, the sadness, the grief, the loss, the mourning that happens when we experience loss, big or small, it doesn't metabolize, it metastasizes. And the saying that's coming up for me is that to be heard is to be healed. And along with being heard is being seen and accepted. And, you know, I love my parents. I don't like to talk about them, but I do not recall having seen my dad cry. One of my best friend's fathers died, who happened to be one of my dad's best friends. And we had one of the sweetest moments that we've had, having a phone call, and there was probably 2 full minutes of silence, just the two of us not knowing what to say and being totally okay with that, just honoring this loss. And so I wish I cry a lot at shows with my clients. I mean, it's beautiful being a coach because nobody's there watching. There's no propaganda. So my client says something, it affects me. I cry. I'm on the phone. They probably don't see it, but they feel it, and it makes it okay for them to process this as well. So I think not only cleansing, but true wisdom and growth and relief and new possibility is on the other side of not holding it back. It's very provocative, KJ, what you said. What other excretions would we, like, what would society be like? And the one that came to me was the breath. You know, you can't last, maybe an astronaut can last a minute, but you can't last an hour without exhaling. Yeah, and tears are probably the same. There's some sort of, on a spiritual or soul level, you can't really last without letting also the grief out in follow its natural process.